What most companies do when they grow, they decide to add new elements to their structure. New companies, new functions, new internal flows. This is the natural path for a business that wants to grow. It is much less common for a company to say stop at some point and start removing what it has previously built. This is why the story of Fresenius, one of Europe's largest healthcare players and an entity that obviously uses transfer pricing in its operations, is so interesting because it just did that. In this episode, I will show you how a global healthcare giant operating in more than 60 countries came to the conclusion that the more companies, transactions, and internal flows there are, the greater risk and not necessarily the advantage, and why simplifying the structure become crucial for Fresenius, not only from the operational perspective but also from a tax and transfer pricing perspective, because sometimes problems start at the very beginning. Oh, and a quick intro if we haven't met before. My name is Michael. I'm a lawyer and an economist by education, a business consultant and analyst by profession, and also a business owner. I run a company called Prezo. You can check it out by clicking on the link provided in the episode description. We specialize in transfer pricing and business analysis, and we help small and medium sized companies to grow by using proven and legal solutions. We work with over 100 companies a year, tech startups, manufacturers, online retailers, and I understand this. You all need clarity and specifics. You need real answers and recommendations. That's what this channel is about, and that's what Prezo is all about. If you're interested in the topics covered in our channel, be sure to click subscribe. This sends a signal to the algorithms, but above all to us that you are there. Let's move on. Okay, so maybe let's start with what Fresenius is, because I assume you may never heard of this brand, but don't worry, this is not surprising. It is not as recognizable as Coca-Cola, Netflix, or Toyota. Fresenius is a company based in Bad Homburg, Germany, which operates in more than 60 countries, employs more than 176,000 people, and generate more than 21.5 billion in revenue in 2024 alone, with 8% organic growth. By the way, speaking of numbers, this episode was based on specific sources, like the January 2020 report Fresenius Failing to Care, annual reports for 2022-2024, and documents related to the future Fresenius transformation program. All the figures you have heard and will hear will come directly from those materials. So, what does the group do? Primarily, it provides systematically critical therapeutic products and services. Its goal is to save and improve the quality of life of patients, mainly those who are chronically and critically ill, in line with its beautifully worded mission, committed to life. Interestingly, the group's history dates back to the 15th century. It was then that the Hirsch pharmacy was established in Frankfurt am Main, which became the property of Fresenius family in 18th century. In 1912, pharmacist and pharmacy owner Dr. Edward Fresenius began manufacturing pharmaceuticals. So we can say that this family have a story of clinical care of over 100 years. But even if you have not heard of Fresenius because of the nature of its business, perhaps you have heard about the significant financial abuses associated with this brand. Let me explain what this is all about. One of the group's companies, Fresenius Medical Care AG and company Gesellschaft Aktienbolag, and a network of dialysis services, was investigated by the US Department of Justice and SEC. The case concerned violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. The violations included paying bribes to healthcare officials and government officials in order to obtain or maintain business in, among others, like Angola, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, Spain, Turkey, West African countries. This practice took place between 2007 and 2016, for almost 10 years. How did the case end? It can be said that it ended with a guilty plea because the company paid a total approximately 231 million in criminal penalties and like disgorgement of illegally obtained profits in 2019. Importantly, the company also admitted to knowingly and intentionally failing to implement reasonable internal accounting controls over financial transactions and maintaining like books and records that accurately reflected those transactions. However, this is not the only case of its kind for Fresenius. In separate proceedings, Fresenius Medical Care North America, the largest operator of dialysis clinics in the United States, paid 5.2 million for overcharging Medicare for hepatitis B tests. So, well, that sounds interesting in context of the company's mission, which, as a reminder, is committed to life, right? But let's move away from financial abuse and focus on what is important from a transfer pricing perspective. So, the ownership and management structure. The entire group constitutes an M&A, so multinational enterprise. Um, and the group structure is based on two key entities, Fresenius SE and Co. Kommanditgesellschaft und Aktienbelag, and Fresenius Management SE. Formally, approximately 73% of Fresenius SE and company shares are freely traded on the stock exchange. So what about the remaining 27? You might be surprised to learn that the remaining shares are owned by Els Kröner Fresenius Stiftung, a non-profit foundation that supports medical research and humanitarian aid. But okay, the foundation is a minority shareholder, right? So it probably has no influence. Intuitively, that's what you might think. Nothing could be farther from the truth because in practice, the foundation controls the entire group. Why? Because Fresenius operates under the legal form of Kommanditgesellschaft and Aktienbelag, where in actual management it is not in the hands of shareholders, but in the hands of so-called general partner. So is the foundation the general partner? No. In the case of Fresenius, the general partner is Fresenius Management SE, the company responsible for the day-to-day management of Fresenius SE and company. Among other things, it appoints the supervisory board, which supervises the management board. And it is Fresenius Management SE that is 100% controlled by the foundation. This is how the foundation gains influence over the company's operations and strategy. What about the free float investors, so the 73%? Their influence is indirect through the general meeting, which elects part of the supervisory board. So, does this model seem unusual or even strange to you? If so, you should know that it is often used in Germany. It is used to secure the stability and long-term strategy of the company against like hostile takeovers and short-term market pressure. The presence of a general partner is precisely what ensures this. Now that we know who actually controls Fresenius and where key decisions are made, we can move on to how this structure translates into the way the business is run. To do so, however, we must start with the fact that for many years Fresenius grew primarily through acquisitions. So let us go back to 2017, when the UK leaves the EU and Donald Trump becomes the president for the first time. Fresenius made two huge acquisitions. It took over Quirónsalud, Spain's largest hospital group, for over 5 billion euro, and acquired Merck biosimilars business, along with key intangible assets. These two transactions have greatly defined the current functional profile of the entire group, but at the same time have dramatically increased its organizational, financial, and tax complexity. The extensive network of subsidiaries, holding companies, and financial companies has made the group difficult to manage from an operational perspective. From a tax perspective, it became increasingly exposed to risk related to transfer pricing, internal financing, and more. This was all the more so in a situation where the high scale of investment was accomplished by a high level of debt. So no wonder then that the Fresenius operating model at the group's use of transfer pricing became the subject of, let's say, public criticism. In 2020, a report entitled Fresenius Failing to Care global tax dodging by a German healthcare multinational was published, which indicate that the group uses aggressive tax optimization with the help of transfer pricing and related financial structures. So I must here also emphasize that the conclusions of this report are not based on the results of tax audits, but on an analysis of publicly available financial data. So, what was demonstrated? The report indicates that Fresenius uses financial companies located, among others, in Luxembourg, Ireland, the Netherlands, and Delaware, in the United States, to issue debt with a total value of approximately 9 billion euro. This debt was used to finance operations in various countries, and interest paid by local subsidiaries significantly reduces their taxable income. Spain in 2017 was cited as an example where a Fresenius subsidiary charged over 100 million euro in interest to affiliated companies in Ireland and the Netherlands. But that's not all. It was also pointed out that the group has an extensive network of holding and insurance companies in Malta, Cayman Islands, Bermuda, British Virgin Islands, Singapore, and branches of German companies also in Panama. Tax havens, of course, which is why the authors of this report suggest that such a structure might serve to transfer shift profits between jurisdictions. So, in Australia, for example, the analysis showed that in some cases, up to 99.9% of the goods purchased from related come from the related entities. So the economic effect was simple: a drastic and or almost complete elimination of local taxable income. And as you can imagine, the supervisory authorities do not look kindly on this. It cannot be the case that most of the costs are generated by related entities and the local entity never makes a profit, regardless of the scale of the business. Growing debt, the complex structure of the group, and increased mortality at Fresenius Medical Care, FSM, are just some of the factors that made simplifying the structure no longer a strategic choice, but a necessity. That is why in 2022 the group launched the Future Fresenius program, whose main objective was not to increase scale or further expansion, but to streamline the group and to reduce its complexity and regain control, of course, over where value is actually created. What was the group's focus? There were like three main objectives: achieve annual cost savings of approximately 1 billion euro starting in 2025, and they achieved this through process optimization, administrative cost reduction, and the investment. So further, it was to achieve an increased EBIT growth forecast for the group in the range of 4% to 8%, and reduce the financial leverage ratio to a target range of 3x to 3.5x to improve the credit profile. Fresenius has clearly defined that the future of the group should be focused on therapy and based on two operational pillars: Fresenius Kabi and Fresenius Helios, both wholly owned by the Fresenius SA and company. A brief explanation of what these two companies do. Fresenius Kabi is responsible for products like intravenous drugs, clinical nutrition, infusion therapy. Fresenius Helios, in turn, is the largest private hospital operator in Europe, including, among others, like the German Helios network and the Spanish Latin American Quirónsalud. These two companies were to help achieve the increased growth through disciplined implementation of the developed strategy. All other activities in turn began to be assessed in terms of whether they support these two areas or merely increase complexity. Another very important step was the deconsolidation of the dialysis business, Fresenius Medical Care. This company was problematic. On the one hand, due to the aforementioned increase in mortality, and on the other hand, due to the huge number of internal transactions, high regulatory risk, and additional compliance burdens. That is why until November 23, FMC was an integral part of the group, and then it was transformed into joint stock company. Fresenius currently holds only 32% stake in the company, which has significantly simplified the group structure, also reduced internal flows and lowered tax risks. Also, the exit from Vamed had a similar effect. This international project business involved in, among others, things like the planning and construction of hospitals based in Vienna was sold in 2025. So we have these three main elements of the change program: deconsolidation of MNC, exit from Vamed, and focus on two pillars, Kabi and Helios. The result? The target financial leverage of 3x was achieved in as early as the first quarter of 2025, with an EBIT of 16.7% at Kabi and organic growth of 7% at Helios. It must be said that these changes were very effective. The story of Fresenius is definitely worth knowing, but not because it is a giant in the medical industry that can be used as an example in various areas. In some, however, it is better not to do so. I definitely not encourage the practice of issuing debt in foreign companies. No, this story is valuable because a large international group had to do something that many companies not decide to do. Admit that the structure that was once supposed to give it an advantage had begun to work against it. Too many companies, internal transactions, financial flows, and places where something could go wrong, like tax, regulatory, or operational. So after the future Fresenius transformation, the group has a simpler structure, which has allowed it to regain control over tax risk. Fewer companies mean fewer internal transactions, fewer points of contact with tax authorities in different countries, and fewer potential disputes and crises. So before you set up or acquire another company in another jurisdiction, ask yourself, do I really need it? Do our company really need it? Does this structure make economic sense, or is it just for tax optimization? Are you sure that the structure isn't holding you back and doesn't feel need to be simplified? Because if Fresenius with over 176,000 employees and operating in 60 countries was able to do it, you will too. And if you only remember one thing from this episode, let it be this: in a company structure, less can be sometimes really mean better. So if you are interested in this topic, subscribe to this channel. It was Michael from Prezo speaking to you, and I will see you in the next episode.